and as chair of the community board for an item later on. He's also going to speak at public forum first. We've also got two other speakers who are going to go first on the public forum. Julie Tate, is she here? Okay, Joseph, welcome. If you'd like to come up and talk to us. You've sent us an email and it has been circulated to receive on everyone's desks. So we've got that, Joseph, and if I can, you're here as in a private capacity, you have 5 minutes.
Greetings. Everyone hear me, please?
Yep.
Great. I just wanted to bring some matters to the attention of the Council. Dunedin has 6 large estuaries. Blueskin is the largest of them. They're a very significant part of our landscape, a very significant part of what makes this place special. Pipperson, for example, is a very significant tourist attraction. Most of our estuaries are really damaged. And because of this, we have Council plans and policies to protect them. And I want to point out the Council has a responsibility to uphold its own plans and policies. Because in the district plan, policy 1633 states that we've got to avoid the effects of land use activities where those effects may compromise the protection of areas of significant Indigenous vegetation and significant habitats of Indigenous fauna in the city. And allowing vehicles to drive on the estuary, which is what has been proposed, obviously will compromise that. The Council also has a method, 1642, to raise awareness of and share information on the protection of these places. And rules. In 1651, permitted activities in areas of significant conservation value. Point number 2, it says any activity which complies with the relevant strategy, plan or covenant. There is no plan, strategy or covenant for this area. Therefore, number 1 applies. Size. Driving, vehicles, recreational activity is not specified. In fact, it requires a resource consent, especially if it's going to cause vegetative modification, such as by crushing, which of course is exactly what is going to happen. So I've asked Council staff to give clarity, and I'd ask you to take this into regard. The eelgrass bed right next to this track is the only significant one left in Blueskin Bay. Eelgrass beds are places where fish spawn. They support diverse communities. In the DOC report 264, it states eelgrass is impacted by mechanical damage. The photographs I supplied on the 22nd of September showed that those tracks were still there after 6 years. I bet Mr. Smith's tracks that he created last week will be there in 6 years' time too. It also states that once seagrass is lost, it does not recover naturally. This is because seagrass spreads vegetatively, it does not flower and set seed in New Zealand. Cut it up, cut it back, it's gone. There is gone the most significant part of an estuarine habitat. This is what we are proposing to allow to happen. I'm pointing out also that since the rocks were placed there, that eelgrass bed has doubled in size. This is no accident. Disturbance has diminished. There's been almost no vehicle traffic in this region. I'm also pointing out that the Council has to have regard for regional council policies. I've listed 3 of them there that the regional council has to implement, and the DCC has to take into account. Also, the Regional Council has responsibility for liaising with this Council. I've written to Peter Boudica, and he is considering this matter now, so I'm hopeful that with a little bit of urging, we'll be discussing this matter with this Council regarding how to protect areas of significant conservation value on this estuary. I also note that there are several very straightforward methods by which this issue can be resolved by the Council to protect the area. What we've seen proposed so far goes in no way forward to protect the safety of the community or to protect the estuary. These are the things that people want to know about. We've taken up a petition. Almost everyone we've approached has signed it to support retention of these rocks, because people in the community are aware that this is a very serious traffic issue, and they don't want to see the hoons damaging the estuary that we've experienced in the past. So it's in your hands. It's very easy. Cite section 344 of the Local Government Act. You can put gates on this place. There is no problem with doing this. It's very straightforward. Probably won't cost any more than putting up these strange bits of furniture that you're proposing. The best outcome actually would be for this road to be turned into an esplanade reserve, which is something the council's done in lots of other areas adjacent to waterways and wetlands. This would enable good management of such a place. I look forward to your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Are you able to take questions, Joseph? Thank you. Questions, Michael?
Yeah, Joseph, look, you were just saying that those eelgrass beds have doubled since the rocks were put there 6 years ago.
Something like that.
Yeah, just last week we heard that when we went out to visit on site, there was a woman said that the boy racers had been on the beach only 2 nights before.
On the beach, did you say?
Yeah, on the beach.
Which beach are you talking about?
On the estuary.
Well, did you see any vehicle tracks from them in the eelgrass bed?
No, I didn't, but I wasn't.
No, there weren't any. They hadn't driven in that area.
They hadn't driven.
If they had driven in that area, you would see the tracks, because like I say, they last.
Yeah, we were told that there were boy racers had been on the beach, on the estuary 2 nights earlier.
It is relatively common for them to be spinning and doing wheel nuts close to the sewage pond track access. Yeah. So, like I say, if they're in that area, you see the tracks. They last for a long, long time. So where they were, she didn't tell you?
No, she didn't say
No,
that yet.
no.
But I wasn't the only one that heard it.
Yeah.
Okay, Hillary?
I was wondering what evidence you have about the eelgrass beds growing. I talked to dock people who I understood to say that they weren't actually sure exactly where they were, and so I'm presuming that they don't know, they haven't got any tracking of what size they are and what size they were and what size they might be.
The evidence is merely my observation over time. I didn't take a photographic essay over years to assess the situation. I went down to take photographs of the situation 2 or 3 weeks ago, whenever it was, and I realised it was much, much larger. And instead of being about 40 metres across, it was about 80 metres across.
So I take it you'd be happy to work with DOC in trying to establish more about them so as that we can fulfil our obligations to watch over them regardless of this particular access to the estuary.
If the City Council could enable DOC to have more time to do this kind of work, I'd be most pleased, and I'd be very happy to help with them.
Their time's not our concern, I don't think.
Yeah.
Sorry, any other questions? Andrew?
Madam Chair, I've got a question that Madam Chair, the question I've got arises from what Joseph's raised about an Esplanade Reserve, but it's for Michael Garbutt. So are we going to have the opportunity to ask Michael questions when we deal with the item?
Yes,
Okay.
that's okay. We'll leave questions to them if that's all right. Of Michael, I've got some myself. Richard?
Joseph, regardless of views one way or the other about whether it should be open or closed, the question I have is with regard to the process. We've received a lot of submissions that argue for keeping it closed. Is there an understanding that that may not be a legal option available to council in the first instance? If I can just explain, we're advised that the the original closure is not legal. And if it's not legal, then it has to be removed. That's a separate, potentially a separate issue from whether or not something should or shouldn't be done in the future. But the message behind most of the submissions arguing that it should be kept closed is don't remove the rocks, as opposed to investigate whether a longer term, more durable solution should be investigated. And so I'm not clear as to whether the community understand that particular difficulty.
Perhaps that's not really a question for me to answer.
Well, I'm not asking you to comment on the legality of it. I'm not asking for a legal opinion from you. We've had one, but I'm trying to get a sense of whether the community believes the council is able to say leave the rocks there at the moment.
This is not a discussion I've been involved in with anybody at all, so I can't answer that question.
That's fine.
Joseph's speaking as an individual, isn't he?
Yes. Yep. I think it's fair to ask him his opinion. If he doesn't want to have it, doesn't have it.
Well,
Yeah,
like I say, I haven't had the discussion, so I can't answer.
That's it, you go. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Joseph. Thank you for your input. Geraldine, any here? No, thank you. You're speaking as an individual. You've got 5 minutes. You know the rules. And I will be stopping you.
Thank you very much. Can I start before my time begins to respond to that question that was put to Joseph?
No. Okay. Just talk to your point. That's all right.
I was shocked when I read the report from the transportation planning staff and the recommendations they've made. There is nothing in this report which improves the safety for local pedestrians. I'm not sure how they moved from the position of suggesting a temporary closing of the track and offering the option of permanent closure to motor vehicles to one where an elaborate but useless monitoring regime and a plan to not only reopen the track to motor vehicles but also to ultimately introduce measures which will encourage using this as an access to the estuary by cars. If you look at the pictures in the report from the Group Manager Transportation on pages 7 to 9, which you've all got in front of you, I presume, you'll see a mock-up of the safety measures which are being recommended. I can't understand the purpose of the 24 metres of sight rail. It is not protecting pedestrians from passing traffic. In fact, it may well trap pedestrians and lead to serious injuries. If cars are coming around that corner and have to move away from the centre line to avoid a collision with another vehicle, they may drive onto the footpath, and anyone using the footpath will be trapped between that barrier and the traffic. So it's actually making it more dangerous. Why are these barriers tapered towards the track? This could be nothing but an invitational signal to motor vehicles. Local pedestrians know the track is there. They find it plenty wide enough to walk, ride or take a kayak down there. Why is there a 4 metre wide gap between the two barriers? My four-wheel drive Toyota Caldina station wagon is less than 1.7 metres wide. Surely a 4 metre gap is far too wide and will only encourage inappropriate use of the track, which according to staff at present is only 1.3 metres wide. As for the signage, a neon sign saying drive this way could not do a better job of advertising this vehicle access. When it says not suitable for low vehicles, this is an invitation for any other vehicle to just come on down. The monitoring regime is an insult to all those people who responded to the Community Board consultation, who came and spoke to the Council on the 22nd of September, and who met you during your visit to Warrington last week. These people are not stupid and they're not liars. There are a considerable number of safety issues associated with this corner, and there is a history of idiots driving around the mud flats at night using this track as an access or exit point, who were disturbing and frightening the neighbours, and this problem ended when the rocks were placed there 6 years ago. You obviously don't believe the validity of our concerns. Removing the rocks and monitoring for 6 months will only tell you what the local people have eloquently articulated. It's a dangerous corner with quite heavy traffic at times in the summer. There's lots of walkers and horses and cyclists, and they're very vulnerable. What will be achieved by these recommendations? I can tell you now, the local people are going to be furious if you endorse this approach suggested by staff. They will not accept these measures as fair and reasonable outcome. They will feel their concerns have not been listened to and will take matters into their own hands. You will have heard of civil disobedience. Well, I suspect the people of Warrington are going to show you what that means. And no, I'm not threatening you. I'm just telling you for the second or third time that the level of local feeling is extremely high. My conclusion is that maybe we're all a bit naive, thinking that a large group of community members who have a genuine and legitimate safety concern and environmental concerns could possibly challenge one very arrogant, selfish, self-appointed chairman of a non-existent ratepayers group which hasn't been active for 20 years. This person just happens to be a wealthy benefactor and owner of the local newspaper and TV station. Now what do they call that? The tartan something or other. And if it wasn't so sad, I'd damn well laugh at the situation. This is not democracy. And if you think you're examiner, you need to stop and examine your consciences. You know that the balance of power is being tilted away from what's right to what you think will appease one very influential individual. Have the courage to stand up for the right for a safe, peaceful community and work with us to create a culture of respect and protection for the local environment and the Kaimoana nursery that we're concerned about.
Any questions? Hello?
Is anything you have said today intended to add any information to what we already have?
I wasn't planning to come here today. I was going to trust the councillors and the staff to come up with maybe a compromise, but when I read that report, I was very, very angry, and I'm here to let you know how the rest of those people out there feel. I think, you know, I've given up being polite, being cooperative, being collaborative, because it has fallen on deaf ears, and I'm very disappointed. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
Can I just ask, I'm slightly concerned with the view that you've taken on these things, because I think that democracy is keeping to the rules, and the very advice we're getting is that we have actually not keeping to the rules. And in fact, if someone wanted to, they could have gone and possibly moved those rocks and had no retribution against them for doing so. So in some ways, other people have been very mature and not taken that view.
The rocks have actually been moved several times by the person you're talking about.
I'm not talking about anyone actually.
Okay.
I'm just wanting to understand in your mind, as also a community board member, about speaking in a private here, isn't it right that it's more democratic to go through a legal process if there's one required than not to?
The last recommendations that came to this committee suggested from staff that the track could be closed temporarily as a safety measure, and then options could be looked at to improve safety on the corner or to close it permanently. This report from staff doesn't seem to do either of those. It no longer suggests that there's an option of closing the track permanently, and the so-called safety measures make it much more dangerous for pedestrians and don't do anything whatsoever to make it safe for pedestrians with access from that up and down the track. Nothing.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Geraldine. Jared, welcome. You have 10 minutes talking on behalf of the community board, and then you're going to sit at the table with us. Oh, sorry, for the speech item.
Thank you, Chair, councillors, members of the community. So I think council's pretty well aware that this is a reasonably emotive subject within our community. Seriously. The board and I'd just like to clarify at the time, I was not chair. The board, when the rocks were placed, did so on the advice that what they were doing was proper. The rocks have been there for some 8 years. The board has, on no less than 2 occasions, revisited that view. Earlier in the year, it had been suggested to myself as chair that maybe the board had not consulted widely enough at the initial time when the rocks were placed. I personally reviewed the information that I could find in relation to the matter and advised the board that I felt, in my view, that we would be doing the community a service by asking them the question as to whether or not restricted access at this point should continue. Now, I use the term restricted access quite carefully because the opponents of the rocks have been quite clear in their view of what the rocks are doing. They are saying the rocks have effectively closed the road. I'd suggest that's not correct. And maybe if I'd started delving into the NZTA website a little bit earlier, I might have been able to shed some more light. Because there's some interesting facts, and I'll pass this on to council once I've finished reading, in relation to definitions of what a road is, including statutory definitions, and more importantly, about the use of motor vehicles on roads. The opponents of this particular rock placing have been quite clear that they believe it is a basic common law right to drive your vehicle on a road. NZTA, on their website, express a totally different view. And I'll just quote, while the common law courts developed detailed rules about the rights of people on foot, riding animals, or driving animal-drawn vehicles to use roads, they never had to deal with motor vehicles. In a 1981 case, and I won't refer to the case specifically, the New Zealand Court of Appeal rejected a claim that the law gave individuals an absolute right to use motor vehicles, stating that the liberty to drive is not a natural one. I'd also note that a common law definition of a road, and I know this is superseded by some of the legislation that we act under, the common law that we inherited from England used a very simple test to determine what is a road. Essentially, there had to be a right of way or right of passage granted to the public by the landowner. It didn't matter whether the land was publicly or privately owned. It was the permission for the public use that counted. I would suggest to this council that council has enabled the continued use of that road, that Sir Julian actually demonstrated the fact the road is open and able to be used during the site visit. All council has done is merely diverted the traffic. As the community board has time and time again said on this matter, we believe it is in the best interest of our community for those rocks to stay while council consider the long-term options for that particular intersection. I will also, if I may, Madam Chair, with a little bit of time, and I do apologise for not being here at the meeting where Sir Julian spoke on the 2nd of September, but I unfortunately was away on a family holiday. Sir Julian made reference to the community board's process. He brought into question the integrity of those making the decision, which I personally find insulting. The report that went to the board on that matter clearly told the board that we had to enter into the discussion with an open mind. I have every reason to believe that my counter-board members did the same. The fact it was not unanimous, well, that's democracy. The fact there were 2 members that were not present is immaterial. The board made a recommendation to this council, and I ask you, on behalf of my community and the board, to adhere to that request. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you happy to take questions?
Certainly.
Thank you. Anyone would like to ask any questions? Dean?
Thompson's question to the previous submitter, one before that, and that is, are you asking us essentially to continue with a state of affairs that we now know to be illegal?
If I may, through the chair, I believe the legal opinion that is in the public arena that has been provided by Sir Julian's counsel has been on the premise that the road is closed. I'm suggesting to this council that the road is not.
So, to answer the question, are you saying that you believe the legal advice we have is incorrect and that you have a more authoritative legal opinion?
I'm not qualified to provide legal counsel to this council. However, I would point out to this council, the world is full of courtrooms, and the world is always full of courtrooms with two solicitors standing on either sides of the argument. One of them generally tends to be wrong. Most of the time. Just in response to that, as a minimum, maybe the question should be put to Council Solicitor.
No, I'm sure that will be picked up by someone around this table, including yourself when you're sitting there. Richard, did you have a question?
See, I'm just trying to understand are you suggesting that a closed road is a road that nobody can traverse as opposed, other than the person who now owns it, or as opposed to a piece of land that somebody has the right to drive a vehicle on?
Well, I think you've actually asked me two questions.
At least.
The first one is, and again I would refer to Council's counsel, my understanding and the information on the NZTO website is no one has an absolute right to drive on a road. In relation to whether or not a road is closed, I would suggest that if you're unable to access the road and drive on it, it's closed. If you're not, or if you are able to access it, then how can it be closed if you're able to enjoy the road? I'd also just maybe, and probably the image that's up on the screen would be a very good image for council to refer to. On that particular image, I can count just at a glance at least 4 paper, legal, uninformed roads. And I just refer, Mr. Anderson himself, when presenting to council, appears to consider this an uninformed road. Those roads, bounder roads, I doubt very much that there isn't an impediment such as a fence restricting public access on that unformed road.
Just taking your analogy to another example that's been before this council recently in this committee, Marlow Street in South Dunedin, where we stopped people accessing it through one way. The road wasn't actually closed. I think this is the example you were trying to give. We gave cycleway preference, but people had to turn back. It became they couldn't drive to the end, but it wasn't actually closed. Is that the sort of example you were saying we've done to the street here by putting those rocks there?
That is the sort of example that I'm referring to.
Thank you. Mike? No?
Jared, I'm just wondering how Mr. Smith, on the 22nd or whatever day it was that we went out there, how did he demonstrate that the road was not closed? What did he do different to anyone else? We all walked up and down there that day.
The difference Mr. Smith did is he drove his Series 1 Land Rover down through Council's access way through the reserve, along the legal road, which that road access adjoins, which is the same legal road we're referring to now, to park his vehicle immediately below the section that we're discussing with the rocks. Access is not denied. And that is a position our board has been quite clear about all along.
And I guess the only other question I have, and it's sort of been covered by Councillor Thompson, but you have basically said that you're not qualified to give us legal opinion, and I guess it's the same question that Richard asked Joseph earlier and Lee just asked you, but do we take your word over the word of our council lawyer when we get the chance to ask him the same questions?
At this point in time, all I can express is a layman's view on the information that I've read and my assessment of the situation. How council interprets the information that is presented to by legal counsel is entirely over to council. I don't have a degree to be able to provide comment that's going to save you in court.
No, I guess what I would say is perhaps entering into debate. The last time we voted on this issue, I voted against it because I had to take the advice of the staff because I hadn't been out, hadn't seen the site. I guess this time I've probably even got a vote according to what the lawyer says because it's the same thing. He's the lawyer, he's the person that can give that opinion, and I have to go on that. And if I'm not qualified myself, I'm not here.
Council always has the opportunity not to take the legal advice that's given.
Wouldn't be something that I would want to do easily.
Okay, no other questions? Thank you, Jared. I'll invite you back to the table when we come to that item.